Swiss chard is a vegetable that most of us don't think a lot about, but it's becoming more popular in the high-class restaurants. And so since it's easy to grow, we're going to look at some things that you can do with it at home. Now, the varieties that we've got growing in the market, you notice, are very, very colorful. We have the red and the yellow. The type, if you buy it in the supermarket, is going to be whiter, more like regular cabbage. Now, the thing about Swiss chard is that the stem is going to cook at a different pace than will the leaves. And so unless it is very, very young and tender, what you have here, this would probably all cook up at the same pace together. Or you could eat this one raw. But when it gets to be a little bit more mature like this one, we need to separate them because this is going to take so much longer to cook. This would be overdone. The easiest way to do this is to simply take the leaf and fold it in half this way. Once you get it folded in half, then just make a cut somewhere along there, and you have the whole thing separated. It's all right if a little bit of the leaf is stuck on there, it's going to cook just fine. Now what you do with this is chop it up, coarsely chop it depending on what you're going to do with it, or finely chop it, and then you can serve it as you would or cook it as you would celery or asparagus or even regular cabbage. It'll cook up really nice. Cook it only to the tender crisp stage. It'll be nice and crunchy. This you're also going to want to steam down in all probability, but we don't want to cook it as long. And so we're going to look at a recipe today that uses both parts of it, and I'll show you how you can do this. Now we have a wok, and you could do this in a big electric skillet and get it nice and hot. And once it is hot, we're going to put in a little bit of olive oil or any kind of a good cooking oil. This particular dish we're doing is Swiss chard with garlic pasta. So we have about 4 cloves of garlic. And if you're not a big garlic lover, feel free to cut it down. If you really like garlic, feel free to increase a little bit. This one's also got a little bit of spice to it. We have some dried red pepper flakes. And because the stems of the chard are going to take a little bit longer to cook, we're actually going to do some steaming with them or some cooking with the lid on. I've also got some chicken broth. Now this is a low sodium chicken broth. You could use white wine or you could use water if you chose to. The chicken broth gives it a little bit more taste than just water would. All right, spread about 1 to 2 tablespoons, depending on whether you have a non-stick pan, of the vegetable oil in here. And to that we're going to add our garlic. We've got, as I said, about 4 cloves, just thinly sliced, and some red pepper. That's about 1/8 of a teaspoon of red pepper flakes. Stir that around just for a minute. Now the Swiss chard itself is very low calorie. The nutrient profile on this is very similar, especially with the leaves, to what you would find with spinach, which is also the reason that you can substitute it in most spinach recipes. Remember that if the leaves are a little bit mature, however, you are going to want to look for recipes that are cooked. All right, we have the stems from the chard. Now I'm using the variety that we have that's more golden. The varieties that are redder will turn pink, and because they have a pigment that when it gets hot will also turn a different shade, it will turn very light colored pink, almost purplish or blue. If you're going to use that kind, at this point you might also want to stir in about a tablespoon of any kind of flavored vinegar that you like, and that will help retain the color. Now to that we're going to add about 1/4 of a cup of broth. Then we'll put the lid on this and let this cook, somewhere around 3 to 4 minutes. Not too long because it's going to continue to cook later on. All right, this looks like it's just fine. We don't want them to overcook. So at this point, we've evaporated a lot of that liquid. We're going to add the leaves in here next. Get them all in there. This is why we're starting with such a large pan. I'm also going to add about 1/2 teaspoon of pepper, but this is pretty much to taste. So however much you think you'd prefer, you can go with that. Stir this around a little bit. Now, if you were going to use the leaves as a salad, you'd want to spin them dry. But because we're cooking them, we're going to use some of that liquid as part of the cooking, just like you do with spinach. So you leave the liquid that is on the leaves as you go through here. And then we want this to cook down without scorching, so I'm going to add about another 1/4 of a cup of liquid to this. And once again, you let it cook for about 3 to 5 minutes, somewhere in there, depending on the maturity of the chard that you started with. Okay, Okay, as you can see, we have this, it's really calmed down now and it's collapsed quite a bit. You will find, however, that with chard, it never does collapse as much as spinach does. So if you substitute it in a recipe that normally would call for spinach, you need to expect that. I've got a large tomato that's going in here. We're going to toss that together just a little bit. And then this, remember, is a pasta dish, so we've got about a half a pound of penny pasta. And we're going to toss these all together along with about 1/4 of a cup of Parmesan cheese. And that's all there is to this. Now you can leave some of that liquid behind if you choose to. Or you can go ahead and mix that together also. And make sure you get it all, the stems as well. Now remember, if you had used red and the color was no longer what you wanted, you could at this point or somewhere earlier on have added some vinegar. The tomato will add some acid too. But it will look a little bit better if you go ahead and add a little bit more perhaps at this stage. You toss these together just a little bit, and then we'll sprinkle on some Parmesan cheese. Toss some of that together too, and save a little bit to sprinkle over the top. Put on just a little bit of tomato for garnish. And there you have it, something that's highly nutritious. Believe it or not, right now is extremely trendy, and if people come to your house and have this, they may think they're in one of the finest restaurants in Oklahoma City or Tulsa.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.